Winning writer, other over the top crap. It's Life and Law with Eugene Cisco Jr.
All right, we're here again with another installment of Life and Law, where hopefully we can look at some of these areas where life and law merge. We're comfortably here in my sister's basement now. I think it was in my sister's basement last week, so she hasn't kicked me out yet. So we're still here. And there's a bunch of different ways you can reach us. I'm here with Mr. Shane Hall. And Shane, why don't you tell everybody
To
where they can
feed your
find us?
to feed your life and law addiction, find us on Facebook, Twitter, all the relevant platforms with an @ sign with Real Life and Law. So at Real Life and Law, wherever you need to get your fix to find us.
So
More
I,
specifically, Eugene.
That's right. I would encourage you to send us a message, or you can look at my Facebook page. I have a public page. I don't exclude anybody. I have very few parameters of who I take as a friend. And so you can hit me up and private message me and ask where you can see us. We'll be going live. Looks hopefully in another couple of weeks we'll actually be maybe doing this thing live on Facebook. But right now you're seeing us and talking about today. We're going to talk about work and work relationships and what all those things entail. And from the start, I thought about doing this because the value of work to me seems to have been it's coming under a lot of scrutiny now, and you hear it from a lot of people, particularly since the pandemic, and now we've got Omicron part of the pandemic. Since people is laid off and the government's been paying people to stay home, of course, I think a lot of those checks have stopped in some of the states. But when the government started paying people to stay home and where they could make more than they could earn at their hourly job, that was initially always going to be a problem in my mind because who would not want to stay home if you could make more or even marginally? It don't even have to be more. If you were close to what you were getting the last time and not having to get up out of bed, not having to put your clothes on, not having to take a shower and put on your deodorant, if you could sit around the house and make almost as much, why would you not do that?
I,
Hell, sign me up for that. I'm taking it.
I've noticed something strange just in this area, and I'm sure it's elsewhere. People will equate working from home with not even a real job. They'll say, "Well, I have a real job."
Oh yeah. That, oh, ask me about that here in a minute because I have some views on that because that hits to home with me because I do work. I have a lot of what I do from home, and this is not as a result of the pandemic. I've been working from home for a lot of years because I have a laptop and I mostly earn my money through writing and creating things, that I can do from a computer. So I've been doing a lot of that for a long time and kind of working on my own, working for myself. Um, and when you're at home, even your loved ones who see you working don't think you have a real job. It's kind of funny. So work has, at least in the recent past, and I'm going to say in the last year or so, it's coming under a lot of fire because you hear a lot of people talking about it. I mean, I don't think anybody out there watching us, listening to us, has gone into a store where you've seen a help wanted sign. These a lot of these businesses are begging for people to come to work. And even now, since, of course, now we have the Omicron variant, which seems to be more prevalent. And a lot of people, no doubt, I believe, are taking a little more advantage of that and staying away from the workplace. Um, but anyway, when you go into these places and you try to get out and maybe get something to eat or go to the store and purchase something at an average retail store, you have a hard time finding someone to wait on you, to someone to show you anything because the workforce has been greatly diminished. I think the last jobs report showed there was little more than 10 million people, or 10 million jobs out there for people to grab.
Are you familiar with Reddit at all?
I am, yes.
Do you ever go to the subreddit called anti-work?
No,
It's
no.
been blowing up quite a bit, kind of in tandem with the 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 pandemic.
So what do they do? What's the
It's a really interesting. I don't want to say crock pot full of. It's sprinkled from the country over, and now globally, where people will say, "These are my work conditions. Ain't that some shit?" And then other people will say, "Hey, yes." People are starting to coordinate through platforms.
so is it a they're hating their work?
They are, but not the work so much as the puppeteers, because they'll
Oh,
say, "Hey, my boss got a $10 million whatever. We haven't had a raise in 2 years." And
right.
then some folks on that subreddit or elsewhere may say, "Well, you know what? These are your actions," or "Hey, why don't you all coordinate a walkout and stick it to Starbucks or what have you?"
Right.
And now it's not to cut you off, but I'll end my tirade with this. Something I really love from it all is wage slave. That's the insult. Nobody wants to be
Wage.
a wage slave
Right.
anymore.
Well, and all that's part of the work environment, okay? And fortunately or unfortunately, I think there's a lot to be learned from that, you know. Um, so if we look at work, we want to kind of understand what it is. And to me and what it's made up of. Work can be defined in a lot of places. What I consider work, someone if they were watching me wouldn't consider it work at all. Like you say, I work from home. Um, I take my laptop about half of the time I work from home. Well, more than half, 75% of the time I'm working from home. I have my laptop. I do a lot of creating and I can communicate with employees and other staff members. And so, to the naked eye, it probably doesn't look like work. Sometimes I even feel bad about calling it work because the way that I was raised, it doesn't look like work because I'm sitting down. I'm able to be leisure. So it doesn't look like work. But in fact, it is work. What is work? Work is something that you do to earn money. Why do we do it? We work to buy stuff, to buy shit. Okay. If you raise your kids right, you teach them that they have to work to get shit. Okay. Because I think that is where your a lot of people develop their first sense of self-worth through work, and you can learn a lot through the um, skill of working. You can learn about relationships, um, learn about yourself. It's all about learning about yourself initially when you start to begin to work, and you can do it from home. Again, if we're talking about kids and families, giving them chores, giving them a little bit of an allowance and teaching them that when they do things, good things happen. Not just that they feel good, and feeling good's good, but when we talk about work and its traditional meaning, it's usually applied to earning things. I think the second reason why we work is to develop self worth. Um, and I think you see that a lot now. You look at a lot of people who was working that are not that are now not working. And some people are not working of their own choosing, but after a while, a lot of other bad things start happening when you're not working. People around you, most people inherently don't like people that aren't working if they're able to. Most people resent that. That's where you get those comments like it must be nice to stay at home and work, or even a homemaker, a mother. Traditionally, we call them mothers. Now there's more men in the workforce, or not in the workforce, but are working from home and taking care of the kids, which is work. Diminishing that there's value in that. That is, if that's what you do with your life, to me, that first off, it's work, and secondly, it gives you a sense of belonging, a sense of worth, and some value. So to me, other than getting stuff, earning money to pay things and to be an individual, be self sufficient, um, You learn a lot about yourself. It builds self-esteem. It builds in the old people used to call it character. So those are the two reasons that people should work and want to work. Now, what they choose to work at, um, you know, that's where we get into this. How you're looking at that Reddit thing. A lot of these people probably hate their job because they chose the wrong damn job.
What happens though if someone has to work a type of job and they fall into some sick cycle that the pessimist in me blames our own country for in part because our country, not to sound radicalized, but I'm just drawing from some forums and
Right.
whatnot. Um, like America works best when it's homogenized. You have that two income household. You have the man, woman, children. And I wonder if it's not been contorted a bit over the years where it's almost like a financial entrapment where you have to work those wage slave jobs to upkeep the others.
Well, I think I'm not I'm not really I'm not convinced about that. I don't think that's accurate reflection. If you don't like your job, and there are a lot of people that have to work at what we call a job, a J period, O period, B period. That's not a career. If you're working a job, it's not a career, and you're probably going to hate it. You probably don't like it. You're probably going to be pissed at the boss most of the time, and you're probably going to hate the company you work for because you're working a job. There's a big difference in the psychology of a job and finding something you're truly jazzed about every day. And if you're jazzed about that job, then it's not a job, it's a career for you. Because I have seen many people with what we thought was a job turn into a career, and they loved it. So I think most of these people that are unhappy have chose the wrong damn job.
It's very steeped in wisdom. I never thought of it that way.
Yeah. So well, thank you. So you it's the best idea. It's like any other relationship. And if you look at work and employment, um, and choosing that thing that makes you happy. Again, we look at we've talked about in the past, no one can make you happy. You have to find those things that you can make yourself happy because no one's going to do that for you. No one's going to do that for you. Now, so work is one of those things that people, if you do it right, you enjoy it.
So is work the key to happiness?
I think being able to work is the key to happiness. The best I felt was when I got my first job at a supermarket as a carryout. Back in the day, they actually carried out your groceries, and the customers always tipped the little boys like me. So I'd bust my ass and haul some groceries out to some lady's car, and she'd give me 50 cents. Okay, I felt like a full grown ass man at 16 years old when I got my first paycheck. It was the coolest thing in the world. I think I believe the minimum wage at that time was 2.15 an hour. Man, but boy, I worked maybe 20, 25 hours a week. I I was it made me feel so good to be earning my own money. I had control over that part of my life. I didn't have to beg what I consider to be begging my folks for money. And you see adults. That's why I think I'm a big fan of the social network, the social net that we have, but it can suck the life out of you. And it dehumanizes you, and it makes you feel like a child. And as an adult, the last thing we want to feel like is a baby. And so when we're sitting around waiting on that check to come in, you can't possibly feel really good if you're able bodied. And most people will say they're not able bodied, but they know in their gut if they are or not. I do believe that. I think technically there are people who are disabled, technically. But technically, I think there's people out there who believe in their gut they're not disabled and they feel bad every time that check comes in. So I think getting up and working, putting your clothes on and going out and doing something, or you don't have to go out like what I do. if you're working from home, if you find some way to contribute and be of value, then to me that's work. And the one of the reasons you do that is to build that self-worth and self-value. And if you're not happy in your work, then you gotta damn it change work. You gotta find and the key to this, and not only that, but in developing other relationships is what's the value? What are the values of that company? What are the values of those people you're working for? There's two types of workers. Okay? You have independent contractor workers, and then you have employees. Okay? If you're an employee, you might be working a job, but you could also be into a nice career making 6 and 7 figures, okay, at a job. You are accountable to somebody as an employee. The difference between an employee and an independent contractor is an employee has someone who gives them their tools to work, dictates their hours, and gives them a place to work. So that's traditionally what the IRS would consider an employee. If that doesn't happen for you and you're still earning money, you're probably an independent contractor, a sole proprietor in a business. So you set your own rules, you make your own rules, you have your own tools, you decide on what job you're going to go on. So those are the two kind of classifications of people. And there's a lot of people that just aren't cut out to be an employee. Um, I wasn't cut out. Early on, I was okay to be an employee because that's what everybody did. But part of the feeling that these people on these platforms that you're talking about, the Reddit platforms, they're probably not cut out to be employees. They don't like having no control over their work environment. But now I do believe that's because perhaps they even picked the wrong job because there's a lot of jobs out there that allow employees to have some control over their workspace and their workplace and what they do and what they produce. Now, if you're working the line at General Motors or Toyota, you don't have a lot of flexibility there. You're putting a round peg in a round hole, a square peg in a square hole, and you're moving things on down the line. There's not any room for creativity. So if you're a creative person and you like that process of building and creating and thinking outside the box, working the line at General Motors or Toyota is not for you. So is that because that's not their value. Their values are to find someone that fits their needs, someone that doesn't mind to sit there for 8 or 9 hours a day and do the same thing over and over and over. And there's a lot of people like that, and there's no good or no bad, and I'm not casting any uh, aspersions on people that enjoy that. I personally not that way. I can't do it. So eventually I transitioned into, after I got out of law school to work for myself. I tried after I got out of law school to work for somebody else, and it just didn't work. Probably for the same reason people on Reddit hate their jobs. I worked for the state, and damn, I hated working for the state.
So,
I
did you
hated
have
it.
a bad boss, or were you a bad employee?
I thinking I was a bad employee and I had a bad boss. I had a bad situation. It just wasn't for me. Didn't have a lot of freedom. I was very confined, even though it was counseling. I was very confined in the way that I had to deliver the services that I was to deliver. It wasn't for me. I didn't like it. I felt overwhelmed, and there were, a couple of instances I just found myself. I think I only worked that job a year.
How did you decide when you were going to get out?
I I think one of the very first times I had a panic attack. So yeah, the very first time I had a panic attack, shit was coming down. I worked in this program called Drug Court. It was a fun program. I loved it. Got to help develop programs and monitor people with addiction issues. They were trying to keep them out of the prison system and jail system and into society. A very successful program, and I loved the program. However, when I worked it, it was under the guise and I was under the control of the state. And we had someone who would come in, drop in periodically every 2 months and take a look around and, try to monitor from afar and tell me what I was doing wrong, even though At this particular moment, I'm not trying, I won't ramble. At this particular moment, the lady came in, dropped in unannounced. Our judge, we had court that day, so I had probably 18 people who were scheduled for court. So I had court going on. I had 5 or 6 people that had absconded and left the program, and I was trying to hunt them down. So a convergence of a lot of things was going not good for me. Okay. But this is the same thing that had happened several other times. So, but I managed to handle it. But when she came in, she sat across from me and chose that time to want to do a, a review of me and to do my annual review or quarterly review. So she sat across the table just like you're sitting across and was then starting to attack what I felt attack me and all of the things that was going wrong, half of which I couldn't prevent. She refused to look at the fact that overwhelmingly most of my clients, and this is a fractious population anyway, but most of my clients were doing well and were successful. Okay, so she picked on, the handful that had chose to leave within the last 2 or 3 days, leave the program, and started to pick on me for that. And so I heard her and I thought, I could feel the tension growing in my chest. I was 30. I just graduated law school, 34 years old, I guess, 33 or 34 years old, and had already had my sights on working for myself in another program, developing my own counseling program and opening up my own office in connection with my law degree. So she was wah, 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 Charlie Brown's teacher on the chalkboard. Wah, 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 wah. So that's really what it turned into in my ear. I got a tightness in my chest, ringing in my ear. And I finally looked at her. Her name was Joni. I won't tell her last name. I said, Joni, I said, I'm not feeling well today. I said, I think I'm going to have lunch. It was like 11:30. I looked at my watch. I said, it's 11:30. She said, you can't leave. I said, yeah, I can. I said, I'm going to leave. I'm going to go down here and have something to eat. And I'll be back. If you're still here, we'll talk. And in that half hour, 45 minutes, I went across the street, got me a sandwich, and sat there and I thought, what has gone on? What is going on with me? Because it's not like me. And then it hit me. All my psychology training had come back. I said, son of a bitch. I said, I have had a panic attack. And I realized at that point, it wasn't worth it. That kind of stress to me was not worth it. I wasn't, I couldn't do what I wanted to do uh, the way that I wanted to do it. So I left that job immediately. Like the next day, I found a place. I contracted with another lawyer to use his space. I paid a lot more for it, but I had to. I had no place to go. So I contracted with him. And then, if you fast forward, that was in 2001. You fast forward to now, I've done quite well, but it all started there. And that's how I knew that job was not right for me. And I realized at that point later, those jobs are not for me. Working for somebody else is not for me. I feel fulfilled every day when I go to work because there's about 4 different things that I can do that I call work. Most Some other people may not call it work, but I call it work because it generates income. But mostly it generates income, but mostly I enjoy it. I have found a way to use my skills in a situation that makes me money and it makes a difference. And those are the 2 things that guide me when it comes to work. Most people, if you're lucky, you get to that position in your life. And I advocate if you have any kind of a particular skill, a particular skill or some kind of particular knowledge that you might be best served using that on your own and trying to find your own little niche to where you can find real happiness. Because I think that's where it comes from. But that's not to say you can't work as a photo guy in Walmart and be perfectly happy. I had a client as an attorney, I did his divorce. And after talking to him, this guy was knocking down about 95 grand. This was about 10 years ago, about 95 grand as a manager in a photo department. He had started out as a job and turned into a hell of a career. Guy made some money and got to where he enjoyed his job because it tr when you transition from a job to a career and that mindset, then you begin to learn that you do have some flexibility, and he at least found something that turned him on, um, and the money was probably a factor. However, within that sphere, he probably learned how he could exert some control and have some freedom to do what made him feel good, and also pleased his boss. So he found the perfect way. So and that happens. So to me, work serves a lot of those purposes, and it's really researching the values of, first off, you have to know you, and I think that takes a while. So there for a while, you're gonna have some learning curve issues, um, minimum wage jobs or entry level positions, whatever you wanna say. The value in those is learning yourself.
It's like learning to walk. You've got to
Exactly.
stumble through those
Yeah.
JOBs.
You have to go through them because you learn a lot. You learn a lot about assholes. You know? To me, the most valuable part of that transition is learning what you don't like. And if you live long enough and if you're lucky enough, you learn what you don't like along the way, and then you begin to narrow you identify that turd when you see it, and you don't have to deal with that turd anymore. Um, One of the biggest job skills I think you can learn is, you know, develop that asshole meter. Once you realize you're confronted with an asshole, you don't have to spend near the energy on them, and then you move on. But these entry level jobs are full of those kind of people. Could be coworkers, it could be your boss, it could be management. So you learn, I think to me, the value in a lot of these entry level positions. And by the way, most people, overwhelmingly, most people don't stay in an entry level position. They just don't. Um, I can't remember what the statistical data is, but it's less than a year. Most people are in an entry level position less than a year. And if you're really, really in tune, you looking at, even if it's that job, you look at that job and you look in that environment in the world of that job and say, how can I advance? How can I meet some of my needs and make a little more money? What kind of training and tools and skills do I need in order to move up and do something different? But most people aren't geared that way. They're just not. I always have had the knack, probably because of my father, had the knack to look at a situation and say, "Well, how can I do that?" I've always gotten into a job and said, "How how can I do that? What can I do to be that? What can I do to own that company? What can I do to," and really what I was saying is, what do I need to do to have the freedom and flexibility to be able to do that job, but do it the way that I want to do it? I've always done that. I don't know, and I'm possibly believe it's a lot of my father watching him. He was a very artistic fella. Was a musician and a songwriter, but was a real good thinker. Now his follow through, he never had the skills or a lot of times the stick to itness to follow through with a lot of his stuff. But I watched so many of his damn ideas who were great ideas, and watched him hammer out this stuff because he hated his job, and he would work on the edges on other things, and was just unbelievable to me, the creativity he had. So I get a lot of that. So I look at a place, and I catch myself doing that. My daughter's boyfriend uh, cut grass for this fella. Well, a few years ago, he's cutting grass for this guy. Guy's making a killing cutting grass and doing all those things. And I said to him, my daughter's boyfriend, why don't you get you a couple lawnmowers? Get you some guys. There's people wanting to work. Why don't you do that? Because he's a smart guy. He learned that field and took pride in what he did. I said, why don't you try this? He just never did it. And I'm like, well, I'll front you. I'll help you buy a truck and front you some mowers. Never did it. But most people don't have the ability to do that. They don't want it.
You feel that you've passed that on to your children? Have they do they look at you with that wonder and inspiration that you looked at your father with?
I c- yeah, I don't know. It's hard to say. I think I've got one daughter, and that's really an entrepreneurial spirit. Is really what we're talking about. So that independent contractor, the other type of worker. Um, I think of my 4 kids, I think 1, maybe 2 have that actual spirit. I one of them has the real spirit, but I'm not so sure they have the the necessary get up and go to take it to the next level, but they're young. So I didn't but I've always had to get up and go. I mean, there's times when I work 20 hours a week or 20 hours a day, you know? So you've got to combine all those. You got to combine your skill set. You got to know what you do. You got to combine that. You got to combine that with what you want to do with those skills and who's willing to pay you to do that. Now, once you get those things together, you got one happy SOB out there doing a job. And so, um, the art of work, and I call it the art of work because it is an art. There's a book out there, and I read it years ago and kind of refreshed my memory on it. A fellow named Studs Terkel, who wrote a column for one of the Chicago papers. He's passed away, but he was an essayist, and he wrote a book of fabulous essays on working people. It's called Working, and it's by Studs Terkel. Would encourage you out there, if you're listening or watching, to take a look at that because it's filled full of essays from people from all walks of life. And what you get from those essays is that people loved their work. These were people who now there were some that didn't, but overwhelmingly they loved their work. They liked the fact that they were contributing. And that is just to me the most value that you can get. And I think, it's in the Bible. We've been working and they've been talking about work in the forever since the Bible days. I believe that there's some of those things. Apostle Paul, we was talking about work and getting stuff, and I was reminded of the old Miles Standish, old Pilgrim, Captain Miles Standish from the Pilgrim days. He was the one that famously got associated with the phrase, if you don't work, you don't eat. He said it. He said it better than I just said it. But that actually came from a lot of those pilgrims were very religious people, and that come from the Apostle Paul. Um, the need to work for your food. And so on its basic level, from the beginning of time, we've known we've had to work for our food. And when you take that away from people, then I think that's when you start seeing the erosion of the individual. And then, of course, a lot of the other things that come along with that. Um, so this damn phone.
We tie so much of our sense of worth to it too.
Yes.
Not the phone, but work.
Yeah. Oh, exactly. So it all comes to that. So you know, this discussion of work, we kind of did a cursory section on it. Where we can go into more about employment on a later date. Maybe we can save that for next time to talk about sheer employment, employment law, employment contracts, and things of that nature. But today, we just talk about work and the value of it and what we can get from it.
I'd like to take some time to read that book too and maybe revisit the topic.
Oh yeah, we can do that. So let's do this. Y'all drop me a line. We're looking at and tell us again where we can be found, Shane.
At Real Life and Law, whether it's on Facebook, Twitter, you want to email us, Real Life and Law.
And we're just now getting our legs under us. This is probably maybe the fifth or sixth cast we've had. So we're getting our legs under us. I think we're a little more smooth today, absent the phone that just went off. But we're a little more smooth today than we were when we first started. And I'm a little more comfortable about talking than I was before. and getting my thoughts organized. So, but we could always use input. I'm a free speech guy, even if it's hate speech. So if you want to hate on me, bring it on. We got plenty of places and avenues for you can just let it fly. Okay. If you want to talk about my hair or the way I'm talking, the topic, just let it go. So, having said all that, I think that if you will cue up the
Turning around and
turn me around and help me to the door, and we'll get out of here.
sounds good.
Turn me around, help me to the door. I'll never make it on my own. Turn me